Because often what happens when we tweak our sacrum or we tweak our lower back, we try to ignore it, right, until it wakes up our attention. So we'll start with a little more awareness and then we'll work into strengthening. Because until we know what's going on, we can't really go and hammer at it like we might typically do to strengthen. I'm going to get strong, right? Well, the body doesn't always respond that way when they're in either pain or acute pain. Part of what we have to pay attention to is the nervous system and how it's responding to pain. So we want to focus more on the exhalation. We want to calm the nervous system down. We want to focus on symmetry and stability, of course. And oftentimes we don't recognize whether one hip is lifted or the other. And whether you're feeling pain or not, it's always a good idea to understand how the biomechanics are working. And then if you are in acute pain or experiencing a lot of discomfort, just remember you don't have to crank at it. I mentioned that last night into class, right? Like, you know what, when you crank your leg around, no, you don't want to do that when we're in pain, right? And even though we might be flexible, I would recommend working at maybe 30, 40, 50% of your range of motion. And then knowing that you have a tendency for the sacrum to wig out at any time, you might really just practice your asymmetrical poses at 80% until you really feel quite stable. A chair, some kind of a bolster, and perhaps two therapeutic balls that are a little bit smaller than a tennis ball. Now, I happen to have a lacrosse ball and a tennis ball. They're not the same size. So if you can't get two balls at the same size, this is also a nice tool called a Ma roller. Sometimes you can get a mini Ma roller, but they have these two knobs here that sit on either side of the spine that can actually be used quite therapeutically when you're in SI joint discomfort. Sometimes it's a little hard for people, so you might want to roll a blanket on it. So grab what you have, and we'll use a strap as well. If you don't have two balls the same size, you can use one ball. And I would give it the smaller ball. And I'm briefly going to show you and share the screen here of what the SI joint looks like. What's interesting, always interesting to me, is how it sits in the spine and the relationship between the spinal column, because it is attached to the spinal column at L5 and S1, but also how it's attached to the pelvis on either side. I think you can see that. And right here you see the sacroiliac joints. And so it's these areas of the joints that get a little tweaked. So that's just a bit of a visual. And then so starting here, grabbing just one of your balls, you're going to bend your knees, bring your feet to the floor, using your hands for support, and just lift one side of your body and just begin to work into the butt muscle, basically on one side. And if you can remember that nice illustration that I showed you, see if you can roll all the way down to your sits bones. You'll find those two pointy points at the bottom. And on up, you might feel a little tenderness where your leg bone moves into the pelvis, where the hip is. I can feel that on this side. And then roll to the other side. Just begin to warm up that area. Warming up the other side, using your hands for support, moving around the big muscles of the glutes, maybe in a circular motion, maybe rolling all the way down towards that sits bone, kind of getting an idea of the map of your pelvis. I mean, this is a great idea for when you're hiking. All right, let's come forward now and come onto our backs. And once again, bring the ball, now with a little less weight bearing, underneath, and find the center part of your sacrum and very gently lift your hips and just begin to Lift and lower so you have a little idea of where that sacrum is located, where it begins, lower lumbar, upper sacrum, right down the center, just kind of lifting and lowering my bum as I roll the ball down. Now I'm over onto the left side here and just rolling around into the bigger muscle. Now that I'm on my back, I have a little less weight bearing. So the sacrum likes stability. It has ligaments that hold it together that can tweak and torque, and yet it has muscles around it which help to keep it stable. So we have to pay attention to both those groups of muscles. And so as you roll the ball around on one side, here I'm doing it on the left side, you'll begin to feel where those tender spots are. So remember, as I said in the beginning, we're bringing awareness and attention. And then let's shift to the other side. So rolling onto the big muscles of the glutes. And one thing to be aware of when you do this kind of work, especially down into the lower energy chakras of the body, the stabilizer muscles like the glutes and the hip flexors, is to focus a little bit more on the exhalation. So on this side, let's find a tender spot. Let us stay there, settle in, take a breath in. And then as you exhale, slowly allow your weight and your buttock flesh to kind of float around the ball. And then notice how some of the sensations tend to dissipate. And notice where there might be more tenderness or less tenderness now that you bring the ball up towards the sacroiliac joint on the right side. So now that we've opened up some circulation into both sides of the hip, now we're zeroing in a little bit on
the sacroiliac joint, which is the joint that tends to get a little slippery and tweaked and torqued. So the pelvis can certainly shift on the axis of the spine, but then the sacrum can do a little tweaking and torquing. I know this very well in my body, so I work with my pelvis and my sacrum all the time. And then lift the hips and now gently go over to the left side and see if you can find a little bit of that tenderness of the actual SI joint, where that triangular bone of the sacrum hooks into the pelvis on the back side. So you might notice that one is a little more tender.
So notice any of those sensations and pay attention. And then release the ball all together. And just lower the hips down and take a breath. And just feel. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, lengthen the exhalation. Yeah, so feel yourself just sink down into the yoga mat. Feel the stability of the earth supporting you. So energetically, a slippery sacrum, wiggly hips is all about creating more stability. So a good idea to stay with symmetrical postures and less torquing in asymmetrical postures. All right, so as you exhale now, gently walk the feet towards your hips, roll to your side, and slowly come up into a seated pose. And we're going to do a similar thing now, a little wake up and release in a seated forward fold. So start with your legs out and gently walk your hips back. Yeah. So not like choo-choo train. I want you to pay attention as you walk your hips forward, nice and slow. Notice how you have to weight shift. One leg goes forward. Weight shift, the other leg goes forward. This is actually, let's go backwards now, the action of our ability to walk on the planet. But as we do that, there's this little torquing of the sacrum. And if the sacroiliac joints aren't stabilized in the pelvis, one will lead before the other, and that causes the pain. So slow it down. Now, as you exhale, lifting one hip, draw the belly in and bring that hip forward. Inhale, lower it down. So we're lowering it down, slowing it down even more. Exhale, draw the belly in, let the other hip come forward. Inhale, drop down. Exhale, shift. So now we're feeling a little more connection between the pelvic floor muscles and our movement in space and time, but very safely here on the floor. Now shift your weight over to the right and slide the ball once again underneath your left buttocks and bend the left knee and find the sits bones. So keeping the ball behind the sits bones towards the back of the mat. And with a little bit of support from your hands, you're going to roll it the hips in front and in back as you straighten that left leg. So position it with the knee bent and then just rock it forward and back. And you'll feel that same kind of shifting movement. You might even get into a little attachment into the sits bones of the back of the hamstring, so that might feel good. And then remove that. Shift your weight to your left buttock. Lift the right buttock and slide it underneath your glutes first. And then bend the knee and find your sits bones. Make sure the ball is behind the sits bones closer to the back of the mat. Once you've found that, then straighten your right leg a little bit and roll the ball in front and behind that sits bone on the right side. You might notice that you find a little sigh of relief. So maybe there's some tightness there that's starting to release. You know, the sacrum will naturally find its own balance. Sometimes we go to a chiropractor and they assist in that, allowing the body to remember its natural alignment, especially if it's been injured over time. Let's go ahead and release that ball now and come back onto our mats. Knees bent, sliding all the way down, feet underneath our knees. Now press into your feet, gently lift the hips up, and now slide the ball right down into the center of your sacrum. Now your hand stays there just in case that's too much pressure. But just allow yourself to lift and lower slightly as you gently roll the ball right in between those sits bones. So that's basically right down by your tailbone, right in between your buttocks. And then once you've found that place, my hips are elevated about a quarter inch, half inch. Just roll from side to side between those sits bones. So you're right into the center of the body. Now in this position, you have to lift your hips in order to get any kind of movement. So just find that. Good, and then come back to center, lift your hips, remove the ball and slowly lower down. With eyes closed now, take a breath in and a breath out. And then as you take your next exhalation, bring your right knee towards your chest and see how that feels, and left knee towards your chest. So you're equally stretching through the lower back. Bring your hands on top of your knees, straighten your arms. And as you exhale in Apanasana, bend the elbows. Now bring your attention to the sacrum and see if it's moving equally. Inhale, the arms straighten. Exhale, the elbows bend. Yes, we are stretching through the lower back and feeling lengthening of the muscles into the lower back. But we're also noticing the symmetry of the sacrum. And now keeping your right knee towards your chest, very slowly, go ahead and straighten the left leg forward and let it land onto the ground. Now pressing that left heel into the ground, you feel how pressing that left heel into the ground brings that right hip down a little bit. And then take your right hand onto that right knee and just allow it to bend and straighten at the elbow. So here again, this is awareness. Now, what I noticed is I was flexing my foot, kind of bracing myself on this side. So these are the things to notice. Relax the foot and work with the breath. Exhale, elbow bends. Bring your attention to the sacroiliac joint on the right side. So imagine that image in your own body. So that was about 4 or 5 times. And then let the right foot come onto the floor. Relax everything. Take a breath in and feel. And then pressing into the right foot on the next exhale, feel the belly muscles pull in to bend the left knee. Now, when you're in acute pain here, you're moving very slowly. So please allow yourself, and maybe your leg isn't fully extended. Maybe it's just coming to here. So you'll figure out what that is for yourself. And now extend the right leg, pressing the right heel into the floor. Just feel a little bit of everything waking up and stabilizing into the pelvis. And then as you exhale, bending the left knee towards your chest, bring your left hand onto that left knee. And just bend and straighten. And now we're feeling the left sacroiliac joint. Reminds me a little bit of wringing a towel, how you can wring a towel forward on the right and wring it back on the left, or almost like motorcycle gears, where you can do them alternately, right and left on the handlebars. The sacrum functions in a similar way. You can rev up your sacrum. Now, I'm noticing this side is a little tighter, which makes sense. So what I might do is start on this side, go to the right side, and then come back and do this left side once again. So just slowly coaxing a little bit more release into the tighter muscles that are perhaps unconsciously gripping in order to hold the sacrum in place. So remember, the first part's about awareness. And then bring that left foot to the floor. Take a breath in. As you exhale, feel the bellies pull in, and then bend the right knee, bring it back onto the floor. Good. Both feet onto the floor now. Press into both feet equally, and now we're creating some stability in symmetrical position. Release that as you inhale. Press both feet in. Exhale, lengthen the exhalation, about 4, 3, 2. I'm not lifting my hips. 1. Everything is scooping in and stable, more like a gentle hug. Do that 2 more times. Gently release on the inhale. And exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then one more time. Inhale. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. So now roll onto one side. I'm going to roll onto my left side here, cradling my head with my left hand, stacking my knees, stacking my hips. So again, now the sacrum is balanced, top and bottom, a little more weight bearing here, or gravity is pulling to the floor. Sometimes when the quadriceps are tight, it tends to pull the pelvis forward or out of alignment. So let's open up into the quads, bending the top knee, reaching for the foot. This is where you can use your strap if you need to. And press your right knee away. Just a gentle stretch here. You can grip into the buttock and then release it. And then press in. So ideally, a straight line from your knee up towards your shoulder. Release. And a third time. Now again, if one quadricep is tighter than the other and you know that, release, bend that forward, And let's go to the other side. Then you do that one first so that you can come around and do it a second time. Let's do this side now, stacking my knees, flexing my feet. Hips are stacked. Reach behind with either a strap or my hand and release some tension in the quads on this left side. Now I can play with this a little bit and clench my buttocks. You can also play with this bottom leg. Maybe you're able to keep it straight. Maybe you even can bring it forward. But again, symmetry. And release. And stretch through the quadricep. And release. Interesting. This side's a little more flexible. And stretch and release. And one more. So again, you can take the time to do that first side twice if you like. And then let's go ahead and come back onto our backs one more time. Feet underneath our knees and take a breath in. And a breath out. And then gently draw those knees back towards your chest and do a little bit of that Apanasana. Straightening the arms, the knees float away, bending the elbows, the knees come back in. And see if you notice any difference. So again, when you're in an acute stage of pain or discomfort, or just a great practice in the morning before you start your day, you're really spending some intimate time with your sacrum here and paying attention. It needs some attention here. All right, so it's important to recognize coming in and out of postures. As some of you know, you can be standing at a counter and you'll sneeze and do a quick move, and all of a sudden everything tweaks. So as you exhale now, roll over to your side using your core muscles and come back up into a seated pose. And we're going to start a little more lateral stretching. So the idea is to be able to move the body all as one unit. It's when one part of the body goes one direction and the other part goes in the other direction where we get into trouble. So I've got the chair here on my left side, and it's not directly to my left. It's a little bit more in front of me, almost at a 45-degree angle. So go ahead and position your chair. And I've got my left foot in front of my right. If you like, you can still elevate your sits bones on a little cushion or not, depending on how your hips feel. So get yourself set up here. Bringing the chair a little bit more in front of you so you can play with it a little bit. We're going to start now to work with the lateral muscles of the body. So before we rotate towards the left, just lift the chest forward and up and press both sits bones down equally. And as you exhale, begin to exhale, certainly belly up and in, but exhale out of the crown of the head and get nice and long. And then bring your left hand onto the chair, right hand onto the chair. So you've created a long spine and rotate towards the left. Now you can also have a pillow under your arm, or you can bring your left arm down here, just someplace comfortable. You can even bring your forehead down. But I'd like for you to begin to feel the muscles on this right side release and stretch. So if the right hip lifts up, you can allow that. And then as you exhale, gently press the right hip down as you rotate towards the chair. And that little pulsing sensation of inhaling, lift, exhale, rotate, and drop that hip down. Forehead down. Take a few breaths here. Notice if that causes any discomfort and on which side you're feeling it. To modify this a little bit, you can also face a wall. You can imagine a wall is here. So that allows you a little more length into the spine as you rotate. Using your breath as that additional WD-40, focusing on the exhale as you visualize the breath escaping through the crown of the head. So creating some length. A little bit of a forward fold to get length into the spine and release some of the muscles that are attaching into the L5, S1. And then keep the length of the spine, unwind yourself back to center, and then bring your head up towards the sky and just feel. That can be quite stabilizing and satisfying. And then I grab the chair, I exhale. My chair's not that heavy, so I'm not torquing my lower back. Glide it as you must and take it over to the right side. Now you're going to bring your right foot in front of the left. Do the same thing over here. Create extension into the spine. Remember, when you're in acute situation, you're going to practice at 30, 40%, something like that, less than 50. As you exhale, a slight forward fold, and then begin to rotate towards the right, bringing the left hand on top of the right, or maybe you have a pillow, and feeling the stretch into the left side body. Now, if that left hip wants to lift up, you can allow that to happen, and then as you exhale, let the stretch happen as you drop the hip down. So you can let the stretch happen from the rib cage down. You can always bring a blanket or another bolster onto the chair, make it a little more comfortable for yourself, and maybe a little higher, and you get a little more stretch into the upper part of the body. This can be quite a restorative pose, so you could spend up to 10 breaths here if you like. So now just take one more breath here, and then keeping this forward folding action, slowly unwind and come back up to a seated pose. Now notice how that sits bones area feels. Yeah. And we're going to move a little bit more now into some strengthening. So we'll gently walk the chair away without retorquing or injuring the lower back. Okay. And then leaning back on both sits bones, see if you can find those. Manually override, bring the knees up and come back down onto your lower back. And bring your knees to your chest. Hands onto the knees and one more, slowly straightening the arms and bending. And hopefully the response is, hey, yeah, no pain. That was pretty fantastic. Maybe I can do some strengthening now. Or, yeah, right, no pain, but you know what? I think I'm ready for bed. Either or. Bring your feet back down onto the floor now, arms down by your sides, pressing equally into both feet. Now scoop the hips up just a little bit without lifting the hips. Just feel the tilt in the tailbone and then release. And do that a few more times and maybe venture into a little lifting of the pelvis. Remember, we're moving the pelvis as one unit. Close your eyes and visualize the action using either the beautiful illustration or the hand-drawn illustration I showed you. And see if you can notice if the sacroiliac joints are moving in sync. And we're going to do two more. And as you exhale, lengthen the exhalation first. Let the bellies draw in. When there's no more breath now, you're going to move the tilt on the pause after exhale. Inhale, lower down. So this is how you move therapeutically. Exhale, let all the breath out. When there's no more breath, draw the bellies up and in. Press your feet into the floor. See if you can lift up symmetrically. Now, I'm not doing this with a block because I'm less concerned with building muscles and more concerned with finding stability and then building muscles around that stability. So I'm having to pay attention, let's do one more, to how my sacrum is moving, as opposed to squeezing the block and letting that provide the stability for me. But now as I lift my hips up, I'm creating some strength around my ability to perceive whether I'm parallel, squared off, whatever word or cue you're used to, and lower down. Good. Now let's extend this left leg forward, and now bring the right knee, stack it over your right hip. Interlace your fingers so they're behind your right thigh. Now, if your arms aren't long enough, you can use a strap. The idea is to keep your hips parallel. If you've tweaked your sacrum, likely you've got the flexibility to take your knee all the way to your right armpit, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in building strength around a parallel and stable pelvis. So I'm using the strap here. My shoulder blades are down. My feet are flexed. Now imagine pressing towards midline with that left leg, and then straightening the right leg up towards the sky. Exhale, bend. Now we're not taking this right knee towards the chest. We're just squaring off the hips. And one more. My left leg is actually pretty active. Pressing it towards midline. And now slowly letting that knee come towards the chest. Notice. And then straighten, stack the knee over the hip. I'm still resisting into the strap. Bring it into your chest. Inhale, let it stack. So that one I moved a little too far. Exhale, bring it into the chest. And release. Relax the strap, bring the right foot to the floor, press the right foot in, relax the left leg and jiggle it out. Take a breath in. As you exhale, let all the breath out. Draw the bellies in, lengthen the lower back, and let that bring your left foot towards your buttocks as you bend your left knee. And now straighten the right leg. Your right leg is active, your right foot is flexed, and you're squeezing towards midline. So imagine you can even do this in a wall, into a wall. So I've got a wall on the inside of my right ankle. As I do that, that creates a nice stable right side. Exhale, slowly stack the left knee over the left hip and reach around and find your strap. Got a double strap here just because it's easier. I don't have as many tails hanging out. And I've got a shin that's parallel to the floor. Now, if you've got a slippery sacrum, this is super stable. Take a breath here, and as you exhale, straighten the left leg. Inhale, bend. Close your eyes. Imagine that illustration or drawing. Exhale, straighten, and just feel the sacrum is nice and stable. Inhale, bend. And one more time. Exhale, straighten. Inhale, bend. Now keep resisting the back of the thigh into the strap. As you exhale now, begin to bring the left knee towards your chest. Inhale, let the knee come back over the left hip. At no time does that left hip lift. So at no time are we skewing the sacroiliac joint. We're just moving with a very stable sacrum. And exhale. Now let all the breath out. Find that spot. Draw the bellies in. So do that like 3 or 4 times. Release. Let the left foot come to the floor. Take a breath in. As you exhale, draw the bellies in, lengthen. bend the right knee, bring the right foot to the floor. Both feet are now hip distance apart. So in our general classes, we often will throw a block in between our legs to create that instant feeling of stability. But the purpose of this class is to really find that awareness on your own. Now, with both knees bent, see if you can feel both sits bones. And then draw both knees towards your chest. See how that feels, the benefits of that last move. And just gently rock from side to side. Not a big move. Maybe let the knees float away. So that made a difference for me versus the knees closer to my chest. I hear some popping here. So that indicates to me that perhaps this is a better place for my knees. And just feel one side or the other side. Bring your feet back onto the floor and feel. Now, if one side feels closer to the floor or one side feels tighter, that's usually the one side that's elevated, the tighter side. So then you want, let's say it's my right side, you want to do that again, moving mindfully. So you keep remembering that you can double up on the tighter side. So now let's roll on to our belly. You know these movements now as strengthening in the upper back, all the way down into this low back area and into those hip flexors on either side of the sacrum. Let's bring the hands to the small of the back now, both toes pointing back, and lengthen through the back of the body by lifting the belly up and in. So sometimes in an effort to create stability, we actually clench our buttocks. It creates more tension. So relax that. Exhale, lift the belly to the back of the spine, and you'll feel the pubic bone just naturally and gently floats to the mat. Extend both legs back, toenails to the floor. And on your inhale, squeeze the shoulder blades together, elbows will lift, and inhale the chest forward. Exhale, lower down, rotate the head to the right. Keep both hip bones to the floor. Exhale, shoulders back together and down and lift up. Now you'll feel those two hip bony points in the front of your pelvis press towards the floor. Exhale, lower down, head to the left. Relax both arms down by your side, forehead to the floor, and just take a few breaths here and let everything relax. And then bring your hands underneath your shoulders. Shoulders up and back. Moving in and out of postures mindfully is a really good idea. As you exhale, lengthen through your exhalation. Feel the belly lift to the spine, press into your palms, and shift gently back, child's pose. Now move slow. Bring your arms down by your side and just see if they're bending, moving, shifting equally. My knees are a little wider than hip distance, so there's a little more width. It feels more stable. Come back up onto your hands and knees now. And now we'll play a little bit with the breath, pressing down index finger and thumb, and then spin your biceps towards the front of the mat and let that lift the chest. Now allow your tailbone to lift towards the sky. So those are both sits bones moving simultaneously now. As you exhale, bring your toes under. Rotate those biceps inward as you round the back and draw the belly up and in, pressing into the stems of those toes. Inhale. And exhale. So we're not blowing through these postures. Now changing it up a little bit. Inhale. Moving into Chakravakasana. Exhale, lift the belly to the spine. Begin to shift your hips back, lower the elbows to the floor. Shift your hips all the way to the heels, and then forehead down, tailbone down. Inhale, keep the belly lifted, lift the chest, pull back on the hands, come forward. Keep the belly lifted. Exhale, elbows drop, hips shift back, tailbone towards the heels, forehead to the floor. And now let's play with the breath a little bit. Inhale, come forward. Krama exhalation. So halfway back, half the breath, and pause. And all the way back, shift your hips, release all the breath, and pause. Inhale forward. Keep the bellies lifted. So navel lifts, pubic bone gently draws down, hips are stable, shift back, pause. Exhale all the way back, all the breath. Pause. Well done. Sometimes the hardest part of working therapeutically is just moving mindfully and slowly enough to pay attention. Give yourself permission, because once you get into it, you're like, I ain't ever going back. Come back up onto your hands and knees. Now remember the transitions. Swing your knees to one side. Slowly bring your hands down. We're going to finish up on our backs, having the bolster now underneath our knees. Scooching ourselves forward. Bring your feet over the bolster. Bring your hands behind you, or if you have wrist issues, come up onto your fists. Squeeze the shoulder blades back and see if you can roll equally to the sits bones and then roll back. So remember how we did that in the beginning with the ball. Now you're just feeling a little bit more mobility into the pelvis. Let's do one more. Moving symmetrically. And then lowering down. And let's rest here as we straighten our legs in Shavasana. Another option is certainly to elevate your legs up the wall. What I frequently do, if and when it doesn't happen much anymore, but interestingly enough, when I was living on Maui, the windy, wavy side of the island, my sacrum went out frequently. And I would have to slide an ice pack under my lower back before I went to bed and put my legs up the side of the bed. So I'd get a little traction. You know, my legs would be on the side of the bed with the calves onto the top of the bed. And a little ice to create just a little release and calming of the lower back. And that did the trick. Sometimes I'd only have to do it one night, but I would often do it 2 nights in a row, and that would do it. Usually by the fourth or fifth breath now, you'll feel how the body naturally just releases and relaxes. And then paying more attention to the exhalation, continue to lengthen your exhale for another 2 or 3 breaths. Allowing yourself to let go On your next exhalation now, very gently begin to bend one knee and bring your foot onto the bolster cushion. And then pressing into that one foot, engaging abdominals and pelvic floor muscles, bend the other knee and bring the other foot onto the bolster, and you'll feel this natural release in the lower back a little more deeply. Press into both feet equally without lifting the hips. Just feel a gentle curve, pelvic tilt in the spine. Release that. Exhale, bring one knee and the other knee towards your chest, moving ever so mindfully, paying attention to how that sacrum feels, and then rolling over to your side. Remember, move as one unit. Press yourself up as one unit. And we'll finish up here in a symmetrical pose. Bringing our palms together, thumbs resting gently onto the sternum now. Using this practice when we are in an acute phase, and I will do another recording um, for when we feel like we have a little more stability and want to build more strength. So let's close here sweetly with a namaste. Thank you.